Ah, economics video. Yay! Alright, so I have a nice clean drawing here. Yeah, very clean. You know, just the outlining of the different mechanisms, so I guess I'll go through some of that. Related to the Modern Mystic posted a post, and it's again about this Bank of England thingy, you know, the Fed of England, whatever the fuck it's called. You know, just pointing out that money isn't really money. It's banknotes. And there's two kinds of banknotes. There's the ones that the reserves, the ones created by the federal government, and the notes created by banks. And those two notes are different because the notes created by banks are IOUs. They're contracts. When you put your money in, you don't put money in the bank. I mean, yes, you use cash, maybe, quite possibly, to make a deposit. Sometimes you actually use actual cash, but the point is what you're really doing is just making a contract, and they're going to convert your cash into digits, and the cash is going to get consumed. The cash is going to go back into the reserve mechanism of the Fed, and there will exist no cash until there's a claim on it. Yeah, there's no cash until there's a claim on it. It's a claim on cash, and whether there's and the economy can function because there are not sufficient claims on cash to bankrupt anybody. But if there are claims on cash that bankrupt everybody, then you got big trouble. So anyway, there's one little part here. The Modern Mystic is just too obtuse. Everything's a joke and a witticism. Instead of saying things directly, he says them with a joke. So he's talking about curveballs and blah blah blah. And so this guy, you know, who's doing a commentary on the Bank of England bullshit, you know, he talks about it like, okay, threw a curveball and this one lands in the third row. And it's true to an extent, but it's not true to an extent. And then, well, anyway, the second comment, though, down here where he screams, because the guy brings up Germany again, what happens when you print money. And so when you start printing, government starts printing money. And so, yeah, the Modern Mystic's right. This guy's wrong in the sense that it hasn't started printing money yet. But the question is there any way to avoid the government starting to print money? I mean, hasn't the government created all these mechanisms? FDIC insurance, $7 trillion in deposits insured by $30 billion of a fund. Sounds like a big problem to me, right? You don't need much of a failure, especially when you're basically insuring deposits of all kinds of feloniousness. Like the FDIC insurance was extended to the bad paper, you know, that the banks held. So instead of forcing the banks to resolve the bad paper, accept losses, the federal government, FDIC, insured the bad paper. So now there's a bunch of stocks still in the stock market that aren't stocks. They're just garbage. They're an absolute piece of crap. It could just say absolute crap on it. But it's FDIC insured crap. So therefore people will buy it because there's some hope that somebody will buy crap. I mean, they will actually buy crap in the stock market. So it's still a viable stock because although it's absolute crap, it's guaranteed not to lose money. You're guaranteed to win by buying it. You'll get a bond rate of interest as a premium, and you're guaranteed not to lose your money. So you can't do much better than that as a deal, right? There's some upside potential, like it could be one of those piece of crap properties is, you know, on a big pile of uranium or something. So there is a hope that you might make some money on that junk, but it's junk. But it's guaranteed junk. So anyway, well, I mean, these are liabilities. So then you got this $17 trillion of U.S. notes, you know, promises to I'll pay you laters, and you somehow have to keep reselling these things, these bonds, or you're in big trouble. And if you have to increase the premium you pay to sell them, that means interest rates go up, and that means you're in big trouble because most of the money you collect in revenues you'll have to pay in interest. So where's the money going to come from? So when something happens, where's the money going to come from? Where's the money to keep everything going to come from? You could say they could increase taxes on the very wealthy because, yeah, they have a ton of money, so you could take some of that money. But we know if you take that money, the downside is the whole economy is built on scrubbing their toenails, and all of a sudden everybody's going to be unemployed because the rich won't be as rich as they were. So that won't work, because unemployment's the last thing you ever want to do. I mean, you know, yeah. So anyway, so I mean, the point isn't to say, oh, we're already printing money. We're not printing the money. There's $1.2 trillion of cash, U.S. currency in the world, and it's a pretty low amount considering the size of the economy and all that kind of crap. So that's okay. But there's a huge liability against that currency, in the sense that there's a lot of things that currency has to do in the future, and it's not too certain there's going to be any place to get that currency from. Alright. Once the system starts cashing out, there's going to be a problem. So anyway, the ideal is, right, this isn't complicated. This part's pretty simple, right? Work makes stuff. Stuff has value. Value can make people work. Work creates stuff. Stuff has value. Value can make people work, right? So then the only thing that fucks it up is this money thing, right? I mean, you have to have this money converter to make this transition from value to work. But I mean, ideally, like the, you know, the Chinese economy came up in one of his earlier posts. And the commentator in the little documentary he posted there, you know, an hour-long thing on China and their overinvestment. And there was one part that seemed kind of glaring to me, like that doesn't make any sense. So there's this problem in China now, where the really good news is everybody's still working. Okay, work makes stuff. That's good. Work equals stuff. Stuff is good. Stuff is value. So that's good. But that they're making the wrong kind of stuff. Okay, even though some of the stuff seems perfectly rational, like airports and, you know, railway stations and that kind of stuff, but they're apparently making buildings, you know, apartment buildings for rich people, and there's not enough rich people to live in them. But the rich people will buy them. So this was the interesting thing, is the guy was sort of implying that these are bad investments, these very tall buildings full of very expensive apartments, because whatever, 15% of them are empty. But they're purchased is the point. So the person building the building made his money. He sold all the friggin' apartments. He made the money to build the building and make his big giant profit. So there's every reason they're going to keep doing that as long as they can sell the apartments. Now the part that's a little weird is that there's these rich people that apparently can't, you know, it makes sense to have an investment. If I'm going to make an investment, I can choose between buying a Van Gogh or buying an apartment, a condo. Yeah, I'm going to buy the condo. Fuck. You know, I can't sleep in a painting. Can't eat it. Can't do a damn thing with that. But, you know, a freaking apartment, why not? So, yeah, it's rational to make an investment in real estate when real estate is still valuable. And when you're living in a country with 1 billion people, I mean, in it, you know, the odds are they're going to keep wanting nice apartments for quite a while. There's lots of poor people who want to be rich people still. Anyway, there's lots of incentive anyway for people to want to grab your apartment. So it's going to have some value. But the weird thing is there's no talk of renting. So you're saying it would really make sense is if you could buy the apartment and then you rent it for the expense. So then you double your profit in the sense. You will not only have an investment property like a Van Gogh. Let's say if I bought a Van Gogh and then I rented it to some rich guy who wanted to look at it all day. Well, that's win-win for me, right? Because I not only have the investment of the Van Gogh, which may go up in price, but I have the bonus of collecting rent. And so you're saying, why aren't they renting these apartments? Why are they empty? And they talk like there's a middle class in China. And so I'm saying, well, there can't be much of a middle class if they can't find a middle class guy to live in these apartments. I mean, obviously you wouldn't want to rent them to, you know, people who have nothing because they can't pay any rent and they'll trash the place. But you would think they would find somebody to rent their condos just to double their profit. you would think. So that just is, I mean, I guess to me that was just a symbol of saying, aha, middle class is a lie. You know, there's really only two classes in China, stinking rich and stinking poor, and they both stink in a different way. So anyway, but the idea that they're working is good, right? Working is good because it makes stuff. And so the real question is all you want people to do is be making good stuff, not stupid stuff. So you want them to make things that work, you know, things, devices and cameras, but you don't want them to make ads. Ew. You know, you don't want to make like blueprints of how to fuck everybody on the internet, or how to spam Google, or, you know, how to fuck things up. That you don't want them working at. You want them to be working at productive things, not unproductive things. And obviously some of the stuff in value, unfortunately, it just evaporates. You know, like healthcare. That's just the kind of work where, ooh, shit, it's gone. We lost it. You know, you used it up. It doesn't create any durable value that you can go in the future and take that value and trade for it. So it doesn't make like real stuff. So there is some work that's just lost to value, but it's a vaporous value. It isn't value like a house or a car or a refrigerator, or, you know, something you can use for a while. It just blows up. It just right into the vapors. Where other stuff, you have some time to rent it. So some things can be rented, some things can't. The value of healthcare, you can't rent that. You know, you can't make any more profit off of it. The profit is in its use, and that's the end of it. But anyway, that's a whole side issue. I mean, this is just the key thing to recognize. Work is good. Keep people working. Work makes stuff. Stuff is good. Make more stuff. Stuff is value. Work stuff. This is it. That's that's what you want. You want everybody working. You want everybody doing, making, creating value. That's the value, is in the progress of the stuff. The stuff pile is what we're trying to, that's the pyramid we're trying to make, is stuff, good stuff. We're trying to make pyramids of good stuff. Not pyramids, metaphorically, pyramids of good stuff. Alright, so there's lots of ways that, I've gone through this whole banking thing before. I guess I'll just go through some of this stuff just to give you an outline, and then maybe I'll draw a drawing, but we'll see what I get to. So anyway, this is the game. So anything that fucks this up is that we have this money thing that creates the work, okay, and that values the stuff, you know, that monetizes the stuff. So stuff gets monetized, and then it gets converted into work. And the way we're doing it, it's going through these capitalists, right? These layers of capitalism that's converting into work. And it's doing it by collecting rent, essentially. So it's renting the value and then having it convert into work. And so it's just pulling value out of the value. It's taking a piece of the value before it gets converted into work. You know, productive work. Obviously the rich convert it into unproductive work. They convert the value stuff into a monetary commodity, and they buy work, but the work they buy is polishing their toenails and, you know, marbleizing their toilet and all that kind of crap. It has no social value. It's not a train station. And that's where we lose tons of efficiency. You know, you end up doing work, and I do work, let's say, theoretically. You know, there's just a big difference between qualitatively the work we're doing. Let's say I was growing broccoli and you're engineering spam devices to pervert the Google index. Obviously my value is obvious, you know, and your value is exactly the opposite. It's a detriment to my life, not an enhancement of my life. And that's where things kind of go wrong, is that we're incentivized to do work that has no value. It doesn't create stuff and value. It creates menace and hammers and breaky. It smashes efficiency and smashes productivity. It destroys value. It breaks things, like the military. It goes out and it breaks things and then forces us to waste the labor to rebuild it. You know, very bad. Very, very bad. Alright, but it's very good for the renters, very good for the people who are making the capital, the money. Alright, so let's understand money. Money, what I'm saying is all value is stuff. Stuff is the only stuff that has value. Stuff has value. Cameras has value. Car has value. House has value. Heat has value. These things have value. Everything else doesn't have any value. Alright, so you got deeds to stuff. So there's the stuff right there. The deeds to the stuff is the stuff that's the value. And there's lots of this little stuff we have, that's not monetizable directly. There's no practical pawn shop I can go to get the value of this stuff. And I certainly can't go to some pawn shop and still use the value and pawn it. Where I just give them a slip of paper saying, well, look, if I don't pay you back, I'll give it to you then. But if I pay you back, I get to keep my stuff until I pay you back. Then there would be value in me monetizing my surplus. And that's really what runs the economy, is the monetization of surplus. People are kind of afraid to monetize, like their house, and then go buy stock. But rationally, it's probably a good idea. It's as a practical matter, for the last 80 years, it would have been a good idea for you to mortgage your house, if you owned it, take the money and invest it in the stock market. It would be to your advantage in the game. And that's what the rich are able to do, just because they own a whole bunch of stuff that's surplus stuff. They're not living in it. So they can afford to put it in a bank. They can afford to put it somewhere, and they can afford to put it at risk because they don't need it. It's not essential to their existence. Where the average person, the stuff they have is kind of essential to their existence, and they can't afford to lose it. They can't afford to be kicked out of their house. So anyway, deeds are the stuff. The stuff is the stuff, but obviously the way you create money is by putting a deed into a bank and getting money for it. And so I'll go through the rest of the list and I'll explain that I've already done this in previous videos. But anyway, so that's the real deal. That's the hardest stuff. Okay, is owning something. Owning stuff directly is the best money you can have. Cash is the second best money right now. Okay, right now cash is good because they haven't printed it. Now there's a huge, like I said, the obligations the government has are so extensive that one has reason to fear that they're not going to have the cash, they're not going to be able to get the cash to be able to function, and then they're going to start printing the cash. That's the fear. And as soon as they do that, then everything's gone. Okay, everything inflates right out of your pocket. And it is the Germany thing. So the Germany thing is a real scenario. Alright, the $1,000 loaf of bread is a real possibility if the government starts printing cash to pay the bills. And it seems like it might have to print cash to pay the bills, because it seems quite obvious that once things degrade, everything they own has no value. Their bonds have no value. Their their FDIC insurance is underfunded. Where are they going to get the money? Anyway, so cash is the next best thing. The third best thing, let's say, is a bank IOU, because it's FDIC insured. So I should have that written here somewhere, FDIC. I don't, but I should have it somewhere. So a bank is a pretty good asset to have. An IOU from a bank is a good asset because it's likely FDIC insured. But again, we know that insurance fund isn't worth too much. But it's better than this other crap. Alright, and then you have bonds. I mean, U.S. bonds are... okay, I mean, it's a guarantee from the government. It probably should be as good as cash, but we know that bond failure just seems inevitable. It seems unsustainable. If interest rates were ever to return to some sort of normal value, they're doomed. They're unfunctional as a burden. So it seems likely there might be some point in the future where a bond is only going to get 50% on a dollar or something, that they're only going to give you part of the money back. Because their choice will be either give the person who bought the bond half their money, or print the cash. And printing the cash will kill the economy. Stocks. I mean, that's the most useless pile of crap in the economy. The entire stock market is fluff. It's made of nothing. It has no core collateral. So that's where it's essentially a representation of all the junk money, all the bad loans, all the uncollateralized everything, the stock market is a representation of it. So that's where all the bad claims sort of end up, in a sense. And when you create a bad debt or a bad note, they're all going to end up buying stock. Yeah, in a sense. Sort of. Obviously, a house deed could buy stock, but I'm just saying it's just a representation of how much stuff has been monetized. And what I'm arguing is that most of the monetization is monetization on promises of future labor. Like I could argue the bonds that the U.S. government sold, that's in the stock. That's in this. The $17 trillion is the stock market, essentially, because this is uncollateralized borrowing. There's no stuff tied to it. It's a promise on future labor. It's a promise on future taxes, essentially. And and that's essentially what the stock market pretends to be, which is a promise on the profitability of a company over time. And that's the win of the stock market, is you build a business and you win the lottery, by getting the business to a point where it has enough profitability that you can sell its future to some idiot, who will buy 100 years of its productivity. The idea that we'll be around for 100 years, the notion that it will be, and it's just notional, but yeah, it has no actual. When you reduce, stocks can reduce to literally $1. 1 cent on the dollar. That's how low they can go. Where again, owning an apartment, a condo in a Chinese apartment complex, can't go to zero. So, and then you have other. So after stock, you have other credit cards, all that kind of crap. But we know that stuff isn't in much danger just because it is so excessive. The interest rates are so high, the rents are so high on that stuff, that there's a huge protection against failure. But it certainly is all risk capital. It's none of that capital is FDIC insured, so at least it's not a public obligation. But it's probably in some respects just as dicey in this economy as owning a stock. Owning shares in credit card debt is probably just as dicey. In terms of what's the realistic prospect that credit card debt will be paid back in the next 10 years or 20 years, and the prospect is not looking very good. Yeah. All right. So again, the game is really just ownership, and so as I've described before, if you view banks as sort of like a pawn shop, you can kind of get how money would work, because all you'd really have to do is establish a value. Just pick a commodity. It doesn't matter which one; it'll always float. But just pick one and say $1 is equal 1 ounce of gold, or whatever you want to establish. And then once you've established that, you just create a little pawn shop, and you're basically saying to people, whatever you own, like say there was no money in the economy, but all the deeds still existed. So you could own property, you could own a house, you could own your car, and lots of little stuff you could own. And you could take those deeds to the pawn shop and just say, give me cash for the deed. And the pawn shop would produce the cash and give it to you for the deed. That's essentially how banks should function, is that they're really there to just monetize value. So it's something really valuable, it's monetized, so now it can barter to buy work. Now it's turned into cash, and the cash can buy a worker, and the worker can create more value, and that will be monetized. And so the growth of the cash will just basically be dependent on how much surplus is available to be monetized. So as your economy grows in its stuff, it would grow in how much cash would be produced, because there would be commensurate. There would be a connection between the two. Not an exact correlation, but a correlation. And that would represent the necessary growth in the amount of cash would be connected to the growth in the amount of stuff. So as your population increased, the stuff would increase, the work would increase, and the amount of cash available would increase commensurate with the amount of stuff that was being monetized. But what is the so the ideally what would happen is you'd take something to the pawn shop, you'd get money for it, and then you'd go back and give exactly what you paid, what you got, and you'd give it back to the pawn shop and get your stuff back. But obviously that wouldn't work if as the only rule, because people would pawn stuff, it would lose value while it was in the pawn shop, and they'd never go back to buy it back again because it had lost its value. But if you made a contract that said you had to buy it back at the price you paid for it, or you're indebted to some other value you need to contribute, then you can make it work. But that's all that you're really talking about. All you're really talking about is monetizing stuff, value, surplus value. So that's why the rich have this huge advantage, because they have a lot of surplus stuff to monetize. And once they monetize it, it's essentially now renting. Once they create money out of it, now they can create more money by buying work, creating value, and then selling the value. So they can create this little profit engine of the means of production. They can buy ownership into the means of production by monetizing their surplus, thereby creating more stuff they can own, thereby creating more value they can monetize, creating more stuff they can buy more work, and that's the engine. And so the bottom line is that renting surplus is now more profitable than working. So now this little aberrant wheel that's been rolling off of this money thing has now become more profitable in terms of making money than making stuff. Stuff doesn't make money anymore. This engine of bullshit is making money and producing work and producing stuff. So, but it's an engine that's built on future value. It's an engine built on stock market values, IOUs, and that's what's sort of broken the game. Is the creation of it's not even so much the creation, because you could say that it's all honest in the sense that the rich do own. The rich do have the deeds. They do own the federal bonds, which are liabilities against all of us. It's essentially a loan all of us have taken out. We collateralized our future labor in terms of having to pay extra taxes to pay interest to the owner of the bond. And that's the truth of it. But anyway, so rent and interest are essentially the same thing. So if you just think of it as renting. So when you monetize stuff, when you put stuff in the pawn shop, you're essentially making it now rentable. That's sort of, you could almost argue that that's how the pawn shop makes money. Is, let's say you put your plow in the pawn shop, you get money back, your extra plow. You get money from the pawn. You get money directly from the pawn shop for the value of the plow, and now you can play the game. You can buy some workers, and as a benefit to the pawn shop, the profit for the pawn shop is he rents the plow to somebody and makes a profit. So it's essentially that's the game being played. And interest is rent. Same difference. Interest is just renting the value of money. And just as you were renting a plow, but the value of money again has to relate to the value of stuff. And so missing from the the British banker great PDF that everybody's talking is such a wonderful diagram of how money creation is any discussion of collateralized versus uncollateralized money. And it seems to me a glaring omission. There's a huge difference between money borrowed on collateral and money borrowed on no collateral. I mean, fuck. Huge difference between me. I mean, I'm certainly going to know the difference, right? Me having the guy's plow in my house, before I give him the money, are just giving him the money based on his promise to give it back to me, having no liability to any of his assets. I just give it to him. He doesn't have any assets. I don't get anything if he doesn't pay me back. Where if I have his plow, I'm safe. I got value. Huge difference between those two kinds of loans, and I think you'd know it if you were making the loans. You would know the difference, but just totally omitted from the article, which seems rather glaring, because I don't think they're making the connection. Obviously, they're not telling you this is the game. Stuff, value. Stuff is the value. Work makes the stuff. Money is just this stupid thing that we had to add on to make this stuff go to work. Because I'm not going to pay you for your shitty work. I'm not going to give you value for crap work. And so we have to have this medium of exchange where somebody else values your crap. It's like you don't like broccoli, I grow broccoli. So the game is I have to sell the broccoli to somebody who likes broccoli, and then he gives me the pig that you really do want. And so now I can give you the pig and make an exchange with you. So this is the game we have to play, is this conversion into something universally valued. So you have to convert all the value stuff into something universally valued before you can make it useful in terms of exchanges or barter. So it's a good way to look at it as I thought I wrote that down, but apparently I didn't. But it's like creating an everything store. Yeah, barter everything store. So it's like just creating a store, banking, where you can bring anything in, okay, and get anything out. So you bring a pig in and you get a bushel of broccoli. You get whatever the hell you go in with value, you come out with what the value you want to get as an exchange. And that's what the system is supposed to do in some sort of efficient manner. And the argument I'm making is that it's doing it in a manner where we're just renting the value, and the rich are pulling a huge hunk of the value out of each exchange. So instead of getting a crate of broccoli for my pig, I'm only getting a half a crate of broccoli for my pig at the store, because they're pulling so much value out of every exchange in terms of rent and interest. So anyway, the bottom line is like the China example, the only economy is going to exist is going to be an economy where rich people make things for rich people, because poor people don't have any capital, they don't have any money. And so eventually they're not going to want to buy stuff that services poor people because there's no profit in it. But they can make money making things rich people want to own. So they'll make more paintings in the form of very tall buildings that nobody can afford to live in, except the rich, and there aren't enough of them to live in it. But it's like a painting. It's a value, but it doesn't do the poor people. It's cake. They can't eat it. They can't live on cake. They need bread. They need food. They don't need the crumbs, leaking out of the penthouse apartment. Yeah, anyway. So anyway, I could go on and on and on, but I think we'll call that enough. But everything is on this piece of paper. This is the economy. All the key concepts are right here. They're on this piece of paper. Yeah, it's right here. That's the game. So, until next time.